Our first speaker is Maria Gomez, and Maria has a PhD and obtained her degree at evaluating regulation of voltage-dependent calcium channels at Lund University in Sweden. She's currently professor of physiology at the Department of Clinical Sciences in Malmo and a coordinator of the Lund University Diabetes Center. Importantly, which is what you'll hear about from her today, she also coordinates an IMI2 project called BEAT-DKD, or Biomarker Enterprise Attacking Diabetic Kidney Disease. Her laboratory is focused on the mechanisms leading to diabetic complications with the aim to develop and discover new targetable signaling pathways and develop new medicinal products. So with that, Maria.
Thanks so much for this kind introduction, and it's a pleasure being here. We had a fantastic day one yesterday, and I'm looking forward to today's discussions. As said, I'm going to be presenting a little bit about IMI projects in general, and then I will jump into BEAT-DKD more specific, and I'm going to be sharing with you some of the lessons that we've learned about working with this kind of model. I'm completely aware that there is no single recipe to move forward our field and to make sure that we advance, but this is one model that we are very excited about testing, and it's already in this year or so, year and a half since start, it has already proven quite efficient. So So IMI projects started approximately, or exactly 10 years ago. IMI projects are EU public-private partnerships that are funding health research and innovation. But it's not research in a more traditional way, but it's a lot of focus on accelerating research and developing, speeding up patient access to innovative treatments, and improving patient outcomes and safety of medicines. So it's a lot about capitalizing on resources that have been made in the past and trying to be more efficient in the way we utilize these resources. So it has a quite significant budget, 5.3 billion euro since its start, $1 is 1.2 euros, and it has already led into 99 projects and a large number of research outputs and publications. And when so much significant amount of public funding goes in a model for research, you have to make sure to test and to verify that this is a good model. So these projects, IMI projects, have been scrutinized quite a lot, and all kinds of metrics have been applied to see whether they are efficient. And I can say already that in these 10 years, the IMI publications have an impact, citation impact, that is double the average for the world citation impact. And so we are seeing already socioeconomic effects thanks to these IMI projects. So there's been IMI1 projects that went through the period 2008 and 2013. It resulted in 59 projects and 11 calls. I was happy to participate in one of the very first projects called Summit that was about diabetic vascular complications and diabetic kidney complications. And now we have a second generation of IMI project that is called IMI2. It's still focusing on health and developing health in Europe, but it has a bit more broader perspective, and now we have participant companies that are more focused on technologies, on how to deal with big data and imaging, and it's a bit broader spectrum than it was in the past. Also, IMI2 generation of projects have been kind of gravitating towards certain thematic areas that have been prioritized in Europe, like diabetes and dementia, and now more recently Ebola, and how to deal with big data for better outcomes. So the way IMI funding works is that half of it comes from public contribution through the frame of Horizon 2020 projects, and half of it comes from in-kind, private, in-kind or even cash contributions from private companies. And they come from something that is called EFPIA, that stands for European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations. That's the pharmaceutical industry operating in Europe. There are 33 national associations, 40 leading pharmaceutical companies. So this EFPIA is the voice of very many companies in Europe. So the public funding goes to universities, to patients, to regulators, to small, medium enterprise, but it doesn't go to the companies. And so each of these projects is funded jointly. So I wanted to spend a few slides or minutes talking about the benefit of these private-public partnerships. So when I was preparing these slides, I thought I would kind of take a look at what is the perception when we mention and we bring up PPPs, or private-public partnerships. And it seems to me that it's a lot about handshaking, and we saw some of the slides yesterday were about that. And it's about handshaking between people that, I cannot point at the slides, but within people that has coming from different angles, and they look different. We have a red man and a white man. And it's also about building puzzles, and they seem to, these pieces seems to be mutually exclusive, but by virtue of putting them together, we're able to better see the whole picture. And there's also, we see a lot of these Venn diagram representations where it's more not about mutually exclusive parts, but it's about finding the common interest or areas in which we can collaborate. But I very much like the last cartoon there, which is showing us, I mean, we are moving forwards in a direction towards a common goal. That maybe is another nicer thing of seeing these partnerships. And also, when you keep on Googling, you see that many of the cartoons and pictures that come up are about success, or about how, by virtue of collaborating, people from different areas, you're able to get to the moon or to increase your revenues. And it's all about success, which could be a little bit intimidating. Is this wishful thinking, or is it something that is really leading to improvement? And then we have the more comic kind of appreciation of these partnerships, in which we have the cute little public sector that is being engulfed by the beast that is represented by the private sector, or vice versa. The fears could be in the other direction, when you see the private sector being drawn down by the incredible risks that are associated with the public sector. So you can see this issue can be approached from different perspectives. And also in other ways you see that this is there seems to be some kind of hidden agenda between the private sector and the government, and it's all about making money. So some of us may be suspicious about entering these kind of partnerships. So it's probably a little bit of everything which is being represented in these cartoons. But my personal opinion, after working with these IMI projects that are based on these partnerships, is that yes, these type of partnerships, they take a lot of work. You need to get out of your comfort zone, you need to reach out, you need to be making the effort on understanding a different standpoint when you are trying to work together. But as long as you have consensus on the purpose of the partnership, then you have a big advantage, because you are able to deal with problems in a much more efficient way, because you're bringing resources to the table that otherwise you wouldn't be able to access by acting on your own. And it's all, as in any other kind of partnership or human relation, it's all based on trust. Once you create the trust, you're really able to get things done. So it's no different from any other relationship. So just this slide is, apologize for the small text, but the idea was not to be able to read it, but just to show you how long the process of generating these IMR calls can be. So it's all based on priorities from the World Health Organization and from the European different health research strategies, together with the unmet needs of the society, and also with the major challenges that the pharmaceutical industry is facing. Those three ingredients are very important in painting the IMI strategic research agenda. And this is through a series of consultations with experts and society and science people, all through a series of iterations. These different topics are defined, and the different annual agendas are defined, and the topics later on. And then, very importantly, the calls different calls are written and drafted together jointly by the pharma companies together with the EU, the European Commission. So already from the start, you are kind of agreeing on the type of problems that you need to be solving, which that makes it more efficient by the time you apply for funding. So one of these IMI2 calls came out in May 2015, and this is the one that resulted in BTKD. And it's been a long journey from the moment the call was out in May until the project started September a year later. It was a long process, and I think the project benefited a lot by this long planning. Very early on, it was stated in the call very explicitly that the project was expected to find synergies and build on the accessible resources, data, and results from IMI Project Summit, which I had the pleasure to participate on. And also, it said already in the call that synergies were also expected to be taking place with other IMI or US initiatives. And I'm happy to see I went back to the call, and in the call it was already mentioned that we should reach out to Kidney Health Initiative, and I'm very happy to be here today and kind of completing the circle. So BTKD started by the merge of 3 different consortia, Summit, Kidney Connect, and 6KID, and it's at the heart of very many other consortia relevant for diabetes kidney disease research. And the idea is to maximize these synergies and to utilize resources that are already there. And I cannot emphasize enough, and I'm repeating this all the time because I think there's been so many investments and so much money put into research that hasn't led to much. And part of it is because we're not really using properly all those available resources for very many different reasons, maybe because we are not able to access those resources, maybe because we are not talking with each other to that extent that we should be doing. I'm very happy also that since the project started, we reached out to another consortium in the Southeast Asia Dynamo Consortium, and I'm also happy that we're having conversations with the KPMP program, and we are hopefully going to be able to help each other and move faster forward. So this is who we are. We are a group of 21 academic partners, 1 small medium enterprise, and 7 pharma partners. And very importantly, we also have JDRF on board. It's a 5-year project, started officially 1st of September 2016, and it has a significant budget. So a couple of things I want to highlight here. One is that there is all these groups are led by very strong-minded people that have had an impressive career and a track record in the field, and they're very, very competent, and that's why they're part of the consortium. But that also imposes some challenges. The last thing we wanted to do when we got this substantial amount of funding was to say, oh yeah, keep on doing what you were doing and we will be fine. We will have something to report because you're talented people and you're productive. So what we really wanted to make sure is that at every moment when we are working in BTKD, we are asking ourselves the question, would I have been able to do this if I was on my own? And if the answer is yes, go back and rethink, because then we're not using the possibilities that we are now having. So it's a very important thing and theme for this project to work and to elevate us to the next level, is that we're making sure that we're not just doing more of the same. The other point I want to make, I was thinking if I needed to have a disclosure slide, and I think the answer to that is no. We are not working for any of these companies, and the companies are not funding the academic research that we were doing, but instead we are working together with the companies towards a specific goal. And for that, it's very important that we have spent a lot of time defining which is the area or the arena in which we are going to be working, and this is a pre-competitive space. And what is pre-competitive or not could vary a lot from company to company. It depends if it's a big or a small company. So it's very important that you really put some thoughts on what are the things. You are not marrying with every partner for everything that you do during your awake time, but you are marrying for specific purposes. And it's very important to define what that area is. Before, for instance, there was a big incitement for all companies to patent. Now things are changing, and we're seeing a shift there. So maybe the pre-competitive space not only includes basic biology and discovery of biomarkers, but it may also include chemistry or other aspects that before were not considered as pre-competitive. So I think we need to pay attention to that while we are establishing these collaborations. And still, another reflection from this work is that we need a lot of, we need to be aware that we are working with people from different countries, different legislations, and we have to have a very clear legal framework for working. We are lucky that a lot of it is provided by the IMI through these 10 years of experience, but in any case, we ended up having 300 pages of very legally thick, dense language for defining how we are relating to each other. So another kind of learning from this is that as much as we want to integrate and work interdisciplinary with technologies like we spoke yesterday about, we also want to integrate other expertises in these kind of endeavors like our lawyers. We need not just to ask lawyers for advice, but we need to integrate them in our teams so they also understand what we are trying to achieve, to be able to work together to make sure that this is possible. So the goals of BEAT are to provide a holistic systems medicine view of the pathogenesis of DKD with the aim to identify targetable mechanisms and pathways. We still don't understand the history of disease, underlying initiation and progression of DKD, applying a novel subclassification of diabetes. We also want to identify and validate biomarkers of disease progression and treatment response, representing the first steps towards precision medicine in the management of DKD. And I don't need to clarify to you what precision medicine is, but to summarize it is the right prevention and treatment to the right patients at the right time. I think that phrase says a lot. So we are organized in different work packages, and I won't go into too much detail of what we're trying to do, but just briefly, we have 4 work packages that are focusing on discovery, and we have 2 work packages that are focusing on the validation, integration, and translation of these discoveries. And so we have a work package 1 working on biomarkers in observational prospective studies to understand disease progression. We have a work package 2 that is working on efficacy biomarkers, trying to understand how we can measure whether a therapy is working or not, and try to be able to monitor progression and changes more faster. We also have a work package working on mechanisms and pathways. I won't have time to go into that, and an imaging work package. The validation work package is very important, and we are facing with the production of large data sets and different omic layers that need to be integrated. We also have, from the very beginning, a work package 6 that is helping us with regulatory aspects of the project to have that already from scratch, from the thinking. We are thinking that whatever we are doing needs to be qualified in the end. So there are some unique concepts and assets, some I've mentioned before. Just want to highlight that we also agree that kidney biopsies are required for better understanding of DKD pathogenesis. And we are also working, for instance, a lot with urinary vesicles as an unexplored source of information for DKD. I will skip a little bit in the interest of time. This is another busy slide. I just wanted to show you these are 2 tables. The first one is summarizing all the different cohorts, observational cohorts that we have available for the project. And the lower one is clinical trial data and samples. And I just want to ask the audience, researchers sitting here, how many of you have results that you haven't published in your drawers? Up your hands. Yeah, many. And also I'm thinking, how many of you feel that you've been part of a study generating a database or an observational study or a clinical study, and that it has been used for the purpose to which it was designed, but you would be so much happy if you were able to use it more, and that have been limitations because you don't have the money, the funding, the time, but those resources are there, but they are underutilized. Up hands. Oh, not that many. They're good. Yeah. Well, at least the consensus among BTKD partners is that we are often putting a lot of effort in generating these resources, but we're not very good at making them visible and utilized. So These are hundreds of thousands of patients that have contributed to these resources, and I think we have an obligation to use them in a better way than what we're doing today. And for doing this, for sharing these type of resources, we need to make sure that we create the infrastructure that allows that. So one main concept is that we want to kind of centralize or make data available at a central point for some of the results and tools and protocols. But when it comes to sensitive data, we need to have other solutions. And we're working together with the Swiss Institute of Bioinformatics on generating a federated database for querying of different databases. And just to explain what this is about, when you're normally interrogating a normal database, you copy the data from a local machine and you do the analysis locally. When you're working with sensitive data, we can use a federated database. The individual level data stays on the remote database and the analysis is performed remotely, and only the summary data is transformed. But there are challenges when you're doing this kind of harmonization, standardization of analysis on a remote database. You're kind of blind to what is behind the firewall. So you need to put some efforts in making sure that whatever you're comparing is comparable, harmonizing variables, standardizing data formats and units. And this is a little bit of footwork, and it takes energy and resources, but we think it's very worth investing on them and trying to communicate already at the time you set up your new database, so that is done in a way that is communicatable with the other resources that are available worldwide. So just to finalize, very last slide, I wanted to share with you one kind of optimistic message of one of the outcomes from this last year work within BTKD. And this pie chart is showing you the very small pieces in the cake. It's showing you some of the very few diabetes types that we today, with certainty, can diagnose. For instance, type 1 diabetes, secondary diabetes to pancreatic cancer, or MODY, or LADA. Those we can say with some certainty, but the rest of it is like a black box. We call it type 2 diabetes, and we are very aware that there are differences, but we are not really able to dissect those differences. And so investigators in BTKD have come up with combining 6 very simple variables, measure at diagnosis, with information from hospital discharge records and the drug prescription registry, came up with 5 diabetes subgroups or clusters that much better predict disease progression, development of complications, and response or side effects to medications. And I won't have time to go into the details of those different clusters, and they have different names, but here you can see very clearly, for instance, if we focus on the green bar on the last graph showing renal disease, we see that that group, the green group that is representing approximately 14 to 16% of the population, is the one that is suffering to a much larger extent of kidney disease. This is a study that was based on 16,000 patients. It has been validated in additional independent cohorts. It seems to be solid now as far as we have replicated it, and it's telling you that if you take a blood sample at the time of diagnosis and you make a very simple analysis, this is not fancy, expensive omics, this is simple data. We're using age at onset, we're using BMI, we're using hemoglobin 1AC and C-peptide for determining insulin secretion and resistance, and GAD autoantibodies. So we're kind of revisiting some clinical chemistry parameters and using data that for most of us it could be easy to access, so it's already there available, and we are much better in a position to predict what is going on with the patients. And we know that 3 of these groups are very severe, and we should put more efforts on those ones. And the other groups, the moderate ones, maybe we don't need to have that tight control. And in that way, we're already from the beginning kind of doing a more personalized approach and using the resources that we have. So now we are working towards changing guidelines to starting to incorporate at least C-peptide in many of the studies that we're working on, to be able to give this insulin-resistant group that's having renal disease an opportunity to be monitored already from diagnosis. So I think with that, I apologize, I'm a minute later, but with that I will stop. And yes, this has been published. And one very last point. We want to make sure that things, I mean, there's this urgency that we've been talking yesterday that is very important. One thing we want to encourage is that you make your results available as soon as possible. So what we're trying to do is to use more unconventional sources of data dissemination. We're using, for instance, to a large extent, bioarchives, which is an open source, to publish these results. And it doesn't preclude that later they get on in more classical, traditional publications, but I think it's important that we make the data available sooner than later. And with that, thank you very much.